Good morning, good evening, and good day. Welcome, sellers. We are Expandly, the online portal for sellers to expand to new territories. My name is Ricky Hooker, and I'd like to welcome you to our podcast today alongside my colleague, Chris Rolfe, who is Head of Compliance here at Expandly. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Nice. Pleasure, Ricky.
The last few weeks has been a flurry of activity in terms of marketplaces, especially Amazon, broadcasting warning notices regarding what's called GPSR. So if you've received one of those, there's a good chance that there's a lot of confusion surrounding what's required. There's a good chance that you think you've already complied with that, but the law is changing. Chris, tell us about GPSR. What is it? When does it arrive? And broadly speaking, what are we dealing with at the moment?
So historically, it's been about general products. It's the name on the tin, and it covers everything else that doesn't have its own specific regulations. So, electronic devices, they have regulations. Medical devices have regulations. This is for everything else that doesn't have its own dedicated regulation. But what the marketplace is asking for and seeing is that it doesn't apply to online. There's all these questions. Does this apply to us? Is it just in the shops? But no. So this is actually changing to factor in a lot more aspects of the marketplace. So on the 13th of December 2024, so we've got a few months, those changes will need to happen. But that's the day it launches. So you need to be prepared before that. So we're here to guide you and advise and can provide all the answers.
So up until now, sellers have had some really basic requirements on their products. So let's take an online seller who's selling on Amazon, for instance. They may be from abroad. These regulations, these general purpose product safety regulations, they're covering everybody. Is that right? This is for bricks and mortar sellers and online sellers.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So they're covering everybody, and we're now into a stage where, come December, they're being added to by the sound of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody that already works with us will know about our responsible person service. So what the new updates are actually saying is that every product now needs a responsible person, essentially. There has to be certain documents that accompany that product, but there were certain categories which actually didn't need, like safety information, for example. If you're selling a pair of shoes, for example, they didn't need any safety information accompanying that. If you're selling an electronic device, that needed safety information. That's because they carry the CE mark. And what this is doing is it's trying to mirror what already happens with the CE mark. Now, during our responsible person service, we will already, as I said, people who work with us will know this, we already acquire and collate all of these documents on their behalf. So in actual fact, it's our generic service is already covering most of the changes. There's only a couple of changes that are actually needed. So when people see these emails, don't worry, reach out to us. We have it covered.
Let's step back a little bit here in terms of general product safety regulations. What's the law trying to achieve here in terms of the background of why these things have been brought in? Let's try and get down to the basis of why does this exist? What's it achieving?
It's basically about product safety. So it's saying again that there are products out there, and there's a number of other factors. So in a declaration of conformity, again for an electronic device, it only looks at the electronic regulations. Now, this regulation is now looking at things like cybersecurity. It's looking at its effect on other products. It's looking at its effect on batteries. Does it come into contact with batteries? So the safety risk assessment that people are going to need will actually detail all of this information. So originally it was just very, very basic and limited, whereas now it's all encompassing. All products have to review and assess against these regulations?
It's testament, isn't it, to the fact that nowadays we're in a true global selling economy, and it's quite evident that these regulations are able to cater for the fact that whereas just 15 or 20 years ago you were likely to be buying something from a retailer who may have acquired that piece of stock from somewhere else in the world, but likely had a true linear understanding of where those goods had come from. Now you can go and buy something on an online marketplace or online with very little understanding of whereabouts in the world that's either been originally delivered from, where the trader might be, where the obligations of that trader might be, after all, and really what you're buying. And so it does make sense, doesn't it, that there's now safety regulations that mandate, specifically in the country of sale, that these regulations need to be undertaken by the seller wherever they may well be. So
They've even, they've even gone one step further, Ricky. So if as part of the responsible person service, there's a factor where, and the reason why we collate all these documents is, if the worst case happened and there was a product recall or a safety issue or somebody was hurt, the local authorities would visit, but there was no central location for that information to say this product has had a product recall. So the UK government does have that for certain medicines and things, but the EU and this new regulation requires people to register on what they call a safety portal. And what that does is, if there's a safety accident or a product recall, it's accessible to the whole of Europe. So, and then what happens, unfortunately, if it's deemed unsafe in one country, then it's deemed unsafe in all member states. So yes, they're taking this very seriously, and they're thinking about the safety of citizens.
So a lot of sellers who are selling online already, especially those who are selling from overseas and are now selling in the European market, maybe they're on Amazon's Pan-EUMA program, maybe they're just selling in one or two nations. They already require that responsible person service, don't they? Let's talk a little bit about what the existing regulation was before December, and now where that's going to extend for the regulations that we're being told about for the December deadline.
Okay, so typically some products actually didn't need an address, but here at Expandly, we insisted it was best practice to have that address, get it on there, and just have no problems further down the line. Get all the hard work done before. So the requirements were very basic for general products. It needed a picture. Was it clear to understand? Is it misleading? And then contact information, for the manufacturer. But what lengths they're going to now is they're saying that every single product needs a name and address of the manufacturer. Now, if you think you're not the manufacturer, the classification is, if you place your name or your brand on a product, whether it's refurbished or used, it has to have an address. So this other section is about internal processes. So again, we focus on quality management, GMP, some ISO accreditations, and we ask our clients to provide documents and look at that. So then they have to have certain internal processes and provide that as evidence. So that's probably one of the questions that Amazon are going to be asking. They don't always ask for that. And then one of the new things is what I mentioned, is about the product risk assessment. So where products didn't need a declaration of conformity, they actually needed very minimal safety information, whereas now it's actually quite comprehensive. So, but what we'll do is we're going to be, we actually already created them. We've got templates where we can help and assist. It's not a problem, straightforward.
So boiling this down, the seller now requires a number of different pieces of paperwork for every product, even if it's a general product. Whereas previously, most of the clients that we're dealing with through the Expandly portal are CE marked, or cosmetics, or maybe medical devices, or electronics, or things that were already under those guidelines. So come December, as I'm understanding, we're now moving on to every single product is going to need some kind of safety, product safety regulation controls, and those controls will be a degree of paperwork that's required up in the upfront, and then a storage of that paperwork on some kind of online portal so that can be viewed, and then finally an address service on the product within the country that's going to be sold. So for a European seller, they might have to have one for the UK and one for the European member states. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. Right. So essentially, you're going to have 2 addresses on there as a minimum. So it's the manufacturer and then the responsible person.
So they'll now have to have 2 addresses. Okay, so then the end buyer will be able to get their head around where this was being manufactured in the first place, which law that applied to, and then who was representing that particular manufacturer in the country that they're buying it from. Okay, so that gives us quite a good background into why this is happening and what's happening. We know the date that it's going to happen. Let's talk a little bit about the impact for sellers. So staying along this theme with e-commerce sellers, maybe an Amazon seller who's selling FBA on Seller Central, as an example, as there's lots of sellers like that on Expandly, but perhaps we'll touch on bricks and mortar and maybe direct-to-consumer sellers later. There's obviously some work to do with existing products. Their existing products. What do we need to be doing?
Essentially, people are going to have to review their labels and the content that is currently on there. There are quick solutions to get something on there. So, for example, if you've got 1,000 units in stock, you don't need to recall them. You can get somebody to place over a sticky label with the information that you actually need. So there are very quick solutions to this, but fundamentally, you've got to review your whole catalog. In parallel, whilst reviewing those labels and what you've currently got in stock, you're then going to need to actually start planning and changing the other labels. If you don't have a local address, get in touch. We can absolutely help. But fundamentally, there's quite a. If you don't have those documents, it's quite straightforward. However, it can be quite confusing, and we absolutely understand that. So it's typically, though, Ricky, people have these documents already. The manufacturer will already provide a number of these documents. So, GMP manufacturing practice, good manufacturing practice, they will already have these sort of documents. So it's not that daunting. It's actually only 1 or 2 documents that are going to be needed.
I very much enjoyed the shameless plug for Expandly there. Of course, Expandly is a portal whereby you can add these documents and get this address service and have your labels reviewed, whether or not they're on Amazon, whether you're a D2C seller, whether you're a bricks and mortar seller. So you can actually subscribe to the software and on a monthly basis, and that will give you that address and the place that you can deposit these documents, as well as having your labels reviewed by a professional. So yeah, excellent time to talk about Expandly there. And it certainly makes sense from the seller's perspective to be thinking about the timescale now. We're recording this podcast in July 2024. It's a warm day here in the UK. Chris and I both have COVID, which is nice. So we're tucked away at home talking to you guys about the GPSR. And it really kind of drills home here that action now is required. Right now, if you're engineering product stocks for Q4, anything that's going to be staying in stock in Q4 really needs to be labeled up to speed, ready for the new regulations after December. Because any of your residual stock that's sitting in FBA, if that's how the case, or sitting on the shelves in a 3PL or in your own warehouse after the beginning of December, is then going to need to comply to those regulations. So we've got a bit of period now to see through existing stock before that's going to need reworking. And then we're adding some cost and implications to the stock that's already in the system. So it's the time is definitely paramount now to get stock up to speed with existing, to prevent the need for reworking, or indeed to prevent any actions from the outbound. Now, we have seen sellers getting some pretty dramatic messages from Amazon and Seller Central surrounding what this bit looks like, and that Amazon will be delisting SKUs which aren't compliant after the December deadline. Now, it's feasible there'll probably be quite a long lag period between the deadline and when those things come along. But Amazon was certainly, in particular, one of the most compliant marketplaces. Actually, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say whether they are, but a very compliant marketplace. And that's not to mention that other marketplaces are not. But Amazon's certainly at the forefront of ensuring that sellers are compliant to local, regional, and national regulations. So the solution really is in maybe some templated documents, timely action, and getting moving on the relabeling. So let's take a seller who is already in the system. They're already selling. They've already got a responsible person. They've already got a UK address, perhaps. They've already got a European address, perhaps. They're going to need this manufacturer label in addition to their label. They're also going to need to have some risk assessment details and some things to put some templated documents.
So I'll make it sound even easier, really. So if a product is in our warehouse and they're already selling in Europe and the UK, they will already have their own details on there because it would have been approved and reviewed by us. So they would have all of that information at hand already. So the only really problematic thing here is extra extra safety documents. So where you have a declaration of conformity, a CE mark product, you're still going to need this more expansive risk assessment. If you've got tennis shoes or flip-flops, you're going to need this risk assessment. And some people may not actually understand or know any of the answers. So that's going to be the most problematic thing. But it's only really one document that's people really need to look at. So I would say it's the labels and it's the documents. So if they're our client already, it's the label's absolutely going to be fine. But it's more about the safety risk assessment.
Okay, and that risk assessment is surrounding the implications of what could happen if you're using that product and the various other the risks that might come out of that. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it basically looks at, I've got it here. This is taken out of the regulation itself. So it looks at characteristics of the product and is the design of the product safe. Now we've never even discussed that sort of thing before. And are technical features safe? Composition of the materials, are they safe? Are there instructions for assembly? Now you will see that sometimes, but the new pieces where it really starts to dive deeper and spread out its fingers is its effect on other products. So will this be used with other products and will it be connected to other products? So are you going to be plugging this into something? How is that going to affect that product and how is that product going to affect your product? So you've got to do a risk assessment to really understand what's going on, what's the influence here. If somebody plugs that product into my phone, let's say, what's going to happen? So you need to think out of the box and think about other different scenarios. Then the one that's actually quite pertinent at the moment is about disposal instructions and recycling information. So this is now it's mandatory. You have to consider and factor in disposal instructions and recycling logos. So again, it's getting quite complex and a lot of people may not understand, well, what do I need? What do I have to do? So, but again, as part of our service and how we operate, that's basic, that's step-by-step hand-holding through that. We've got to factor in this new product risk assessment. So that's my objective over the next 2 months. So yeah, I think it's quite exciting times, but people don't need to be as scared as it seems. So, we can absolutely help.
So for a bricks and mortar seller who's, that's not selling online, these regulations are going to apply to everybody. So they're going to be in the same situation. And in those situations, perhaps their address in itself would be, or the supplier of that product would be on the product as well as the original manufacturer. So
the current, soon to be old regulation, it factors in, and that's why they've done this, because the saying that I had was that even if you're selling online, you have to imagine that somebody picks that product up off the shelf and they have all the information on the label and they can determine everything they need to know before they buy that product. So now what they're doing here is they're focusing on digital and online aspects. So yeah, absolutely. Any shop out there, there are no changes. There's no major changes, but the same changes apply.
Okay, so let's summarize what's going to be required for an online seller regarding the general changes in the regulations of the GPSR. The date, Chris, that's changing is
13th of December this year,
okay.
2024.
And for new sellers, they're going to need to review their existing inventory, rework any existing inventory that will be in stock after December, and ensure that any new stock that's delivered for Q4 is already in place. And the fast track into what the seller needs to do to be able to make themselves compliant, the risk assessment and the paperwork.
Yes. Yep.
So Expandly subscribers can do that, and Global E-commerce Experts customers can do that just by having a label review of those individual labels, whether they already had one or their goods are already in the market. It's a very inexpensive and easy way to have all of these aspects covered. And the risk assessment itself, is this something that a seller could do themselves, or is something that really needs to be done professionally?
It has to be branded, so it have to be signed and dated by them. So there'll be things like picture of the product, name, date, that sort of stuff. So, but as I said, we've got a template. So for current customers, we can absolutely help and provide that if needed.
Fine. So, from a template will be relatively easy. Otherwise, that seller needs to kind of go through the realms of understanding what that template might need to look like. Sounds like something that a professional should be doing on behalf of their products for any seller that wants to protect the security of their listings online with the marketplaces. So a real sweeping look there at what the GPSR changes are going to do. Chris, thank you so much for your inputs and your assistance with answering our questions. We'll be back again very shortly with more tips and tricks of how to ensure that your listings stay valid and your online trade continues to grow. In the meantime, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.